Hey folks, welcome to today's episode of the Hospitable Hosts podcast. Today's podcast episode invites vacation rental expert Conrad O'Connell to share his insights with Hospitable Hosts on getting started with marketing for your direct booking website. Conrad has been a thought leader in the vacation and short-term rental marketing space for over a decade. In 2016, he founded BuildUp Bookings, a marketing firm laser focused on providing industry-specific insights and solutions to short-term rental hosts, owners, and property managers. Conrad is proud and humbled to have worked with more than 200 vacation rental brands and clients at the helm of BuildUp Bookings, along with his talented and dedicated team of 20 plus marketers. Conrad is co-host on the popular Heads in Beds show podcast with more than 50 episodes and dozens of 5-star ratings from loyal listeners. He is also author of Mastering Vacation Rental Marketing, now available on Amazon.com. He'll get into speaking a bit more about that in today's episode. And in his downtime, you'll usually find Conrad hanging out with his wife and 3 kids, hitting the links or glued to his favorite Boston sports team on TV. Let's get started. Hey, Conrad, it is great to have you. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, I'm excited. It's a rainy day here, but I'm already feeling better. That's the first thing of the day, and looking forward to it. Should be a good conversation.
Nice. And are you actually based in Boston? I know you've got some favorite Boston sports teams. Is that where you're based right now?
No, not at all. So I grew up there. My whole adult life has been in South Carolina, though. So I moved from the Western Massachusetts area, down to South Carolina when I was a teenager. I was 16. So all my sports memories are from when I was a kid, for the most part, as far as going, to games and stuff like that. But yeah, not based in Boston. Obviously, love all the Boston sports teams for sure. But I've been down in South Carolina for some time now.
Nice, love it. And for those not watching the video, I think I spot a Red Sox poster in the background. Is that Fenway Park?
Yeah, there's a Fenway. There's a Fenway Park one right there. It's so funny. That's my dad's favorite thing, right? He's baseball first, and that was the first thing he brought me to when I was a kid. But as we record this, I don't know exactly when this comes out. The Celtics are in the finals. Hopefully, if you're listening later, the Celtics won the finals. So that's who I'm rooting for on the basketball side. But that was when I really, got into it. I was just watching all the sports. Never really was a hockey fan, though. I don't know if that's a offensive thing to say, but as some people,
I mean, it
hockey,
might be.
Just never, it never clicked for me.
I'm based out of Toronto, and I can tell you right now, the Leafs are no longer in it. So that's fair. I can always say that whenever the podcast gets released, the Leafs are out. I can
that's
fairly
tough.
confidently say that.
That's tough. I'm not a huge hockey fan, but I'm aware of their failures, I guess, in the postseason.
Yeah.
Or I guess my understanding is they get to the postseason regularly, but then they fail out pretty early. That's my understanding.
Correct. Yeah, it's the final hurdle that gets us every time, unfortunately. So let's maybe get in kind of the meat of it and start talking about direct booking and kind of marketing for direct bookings. So maybe we can start off by kind of explaining, what marketing for direct booking websites is exactly and how that differs from, Airbnb and Vrbo marketing.
Yeah, so I guess the way that I've always thought about it, it's so funny because I feel like I entered the industry from that frame. The agencies that I worked at previously, to starting my own, the first one that I worked at, we would just take any type of client. We would work with a doctor or a lawyer, whatever kind of local business that would kind of have us as a customer or a client. And I always just thought of marketing as just like, it's just media, it's just a channel. So the idea that there is like one source where all lawyers get their business from just doesn't really exist, right? Of course, if you're a lawyer, you have to do marketing if you want more business. So when I entered kind of, I guess, informally at first, the vacation rental industry, to me, it just seemed natural. Of course, you'll have your own website. Of course, you'll have your own, kind of marketing, approach and plan and things like that. Why wouldn't you? I guess is kind of, the strange bit about this business, of course, is that you don't kind of need to, right? Because you have these OTA platforms that can certainly drive you a lot of business, and in many cases do a phenomenal job, and they deserve a lot of credit, I think, for the work that they do. There's a lot of people that have a business because of Airbnb, and I think that should be applauded. But it's not like that in other verticals. I think that's kind of the weird world that we live in, maybe a little bit here on this side of the coin. Is that pretty much every other business, small business certainly out there can't get started with, no marketing costs, no acquisition costs, et cetera. It's just a part of growing any small business is doing the marketing and media and advertising for it. So I always came at it from that frame. And then, of course, now that we're having this debate now, it feels strange to me at times, when I think about the debate, because I just think, what kind of business do you want to build? Do you want a business that's reliant on just one kind of source or one relationship, one channel? If you do, and you're happy with it, cool. I know there's a lot of people that I've argued with, but discussed over the years this topic, and they're perfectly happy with their relationship with Airbnb. So if that's the case, then awesome. There's not maybe much that we can say or do. I don't believe in necessarily trying to convert people, not my business necessarily. But for people who are looking to, build, a business that's diverse in terms of its sources of income, diverse in terms of its traffic sources, or you're just trying to build a brand, you certainly can't do that off the back of just an OTA like Vrbo or Airbnb. That's for sure.
Yeah, sure. And I imagine that quite a few of the listeners listening to this episode probably are already kind of like won over to some degree to direct, and they're probably just kind of wanting to know, like, where do I start though, right? Like, what are the initial steps? So thinking about kind of building a marketing plan for your first direct booking website, what's some of the initial starting blocks that I should be kind of thinking about? Where do I start building that?
Yeah. In the podcast I do, we always make a joke. How long will we make it into the podcast before I mention the book that I wrote? So I guess I don't know exactly what minute marker we're at.
Question
4
two.
minutes. Yeah. Sorry. So anyways, I wrote a book last year called Mastering Vacation Rental Marketing. And basically it was actually kind of challenging for me to decide what's that one thing that I would tell people. And the answer that I settled on was brand. So there should be some brand associated with your listing. And I think that the single property host is often doing something like awesome beach view condo, whatever, near whatever landmark or something like that, for their Airbnb listing. But the key, I think, to break out of that initially is to have something people can search for that's unique to you, that is a brand that you can kind of build around. And obviously, look, the more, undifferentiated the property, the harder you're going to have with direct bookings, to the point where I think there's many situations where it doesn't make sense to be focused on, these efforts, or at least for you to not spend a significant amount of time and money on it. But if you can build a brand around the property, if either the property itself could have a brand name associated with it, obviously if you have multiple properties, you can kind of build, a brand around that side of things. It's Conrad's Cool Cabin Rentals is the fictional example that I always give, and we have individual listings, that we market, that sort of thing. I think that's actually the first place to start, is a name, something that people can actually find online. And your first win with direct bookings is not necessarily doing advanced social media marketing tactics or, running paid search ads or running ads on Meta like Facebook and Instagram. Your first win is probably someone going on Airbnb, finding the name of your property, searching it on Google, finding you there, and then making a direct booking. That's probably going to be your first 10, 20, 30 direct bookings, or probably something that looks a lot more like that, where you're kind of using the OTA like Airbnb to create a little bit of awareness. And then the savvy guest will sometimes, kind of look for you elsewhere if they can feel like they can get a better rate or different service or easier communication or whatever the case may be.
That makes sense. And then what do you think is kind of the main or one of the main stumbling blocks people make when transitioning over to direct booking? Is it kind of getting that naming wrong? Is it trying to do too much at once kind of thing? Maybe it's something else completely different.
Yeah, it's probably that second one for the most part, right? Thinking that they need to be doing, 3 or 4 or 5 different forms of media or forms of advertising simultaneously, when they probably need to, again, be doing 1 or 2 things well. Like, for example, I think one of the most obvious low-hanging fruit things that you can do from a cost perspective is just marketing to past guests. So the classic, phrase that we might do here is, the best time to plant a tree is 10 years ago. The second best time is today. Same way with collecting email addresses, real email addresses, of course, of past guests, right? The best time to be doing it is when you opened your business. The next best time is today. So we're big fans of, products like StayFine, things like that allow offline email collection. But I know there's some guidebook products and things like that do the same thing. Actually, in our demo that I did with your team, I saw that you guys were maybe looking for that direction as well, where someone would enter an email to kind of access a guidebook or access certain key information. I think that's phenomenal. I think that's like, it's not even a barrier per se, but just putting that in place where it's like, hey, we need your email to confirm your reservation, to confirm this information with you. And look, when you're doing email marketing, people can click one button and unsubscribe, right? If they don't want those messages. But without the ask, you're never going to get it. No one's going to volunteer their email, that's for sure, even if they had a 5-star stay and they booked off an OTA. So I think those sorts of things, doing too much at once, is probably the answer to your question. And I think it's starting with something small. I don't even say mastering it, obviously that's the title of the book, but like competency, like some level of competency with one thing before you move on and try to do 10 things simultaneously.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I guess, and we already touched on it there, starting with that search element, but what's kind of like a key driver of traffic that you see for hosts? What's like typically ends up being the biggest thing for actually bringing people into a website?
Yeah, so I think search is the answer. When we go look at our clients' Google Analytics accounts and we see where the majority of traffic comes from and the majority of conversions come from, search. And when I say search, I mean Google. Of course, there's other search engines, but of course, that's the one that dominates, by a factor of 10 or 20x to 1 when you look at other platforms. So that's the answer, I would say. But it depends on the property. Like there's people that have built entire, I would say, businesses off the back of Instagram because their property is visually very appealing. So I think it's hard to give maybe blanket advice in that situation because there's someone who's, running, an Instagram account for a popular short-term rental, vacation rental, whatever word you want to use, and they're getting significant reach because the property itself almost has this, cinematic appeal to it. People just like looking at it, and so it gets this kind of attention. And we can point to many examples of people that have kind of done that over the past few years. That's not possible, right? If you have the same 3 or 4 bedroom beach house in where I'm based, in North Myrtle Beach that everybody else has, that's not necessarily going to work as well. So there's a lot of, of course, creative ways that someone could do it. Instagram, I think, is one second source that I would reference, probably depending on the property. That could be one of the best performers. But if the answer is like, the data that I collect, what I see, search is king and queen by far in terms of referring traffic, and of course the quality of that traffic turning into bookings.
Nice, awesome. Yeah, and so Hospitable is trying to like work on a bit more, giving more power to hosts around search and SEO, basically search engine optimization, to allow hosts to kind of have a bit more control over that and how they appear in search. But in terms of think about title of a website, description, keywords, how is there any tips that you can give to hosts about what they can think about in terms of what's going to drive more traffic from Google search?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I'll go back to my comments from earlier about brand. I think that's probably the first place to start. So again, the job of your homepage is not to rank for Orlando vacation rental, right? I always joke about that example because I always have told people in the past, if you can rank for that, then close your vacation rental and open an SEO agency, right? You'll make a lot more money ranking people for competitive keywords like that than you will for a single vacation rental property if that were the case. So I think brand is the first job. So again, Conrad's Cool Cabinet Rentals, let's make sure we show up on the first page for people searching for that at least, and then the name of each listing. Let's kind of get that checkbox checked. Then when it comes to like actually expanding out and doing other types of, search kind of optimization, like you said, SEO, that kind of work, I think content could be the next play potentially. Obviously keywords like if you had a oceanfront vacation rental, certainly there's people that are searching for oceanfront vacation rentals in destination, right? There's lots of long tail keywords like that. I typically recommend a tool like Ahrefs to kind of find what those keywords are, what's the relative search volume, what's the competition, that sort of thing. But I think probably the new host is going to be struggling to rank for those terms because their site has no authority, right? No one really cares about it at first. So that's why we want to go after a keyword that essentially has very little or no competition in brand, and then start to expand out maybe into like long tail content, like having a blog, that sort of thing is probably the next best play. And then you will kind of earn I don't know if right's the right word, but you'll earn the sort of opportunity to rank for higher competitive keywords that have a little bit more booking intent. And typically that's when you're also stacking in multiple properties. The one last thing I'll say there about SEO is that instead of all the fancy tools and spreadsheets and all this kind of stuff, instead of overthinking it, I think the one thing that people should do more of is just what I call reading the search results. So doing a search, skipping past the ads for the time being and just looking at each result coming up and look at it objectively and say, what is this? What is Google telling me about this kind of result, right? And what you'll find in many cases is that it's very rare that single property, websites or single listing websites rank for competitive keywords. Yes, there's sort of a technical algorithmic reason for that, lack of links, that sort of thing. But it's often like that's not what the searcher is looking for. The searcher isn't doing a search in Google in many cases and looking for one single oceanfront condo or home or a cabin or whatever the case may be. They're looking for collections of properties, right? Like even the local websites that rank that aren't OTAs typically, and this is the kind of client that we work with a lot, will have a collection of 18 oceanfront properties, and that could rank well in Google. So I think it's understanding what the search results are and not trying to, put a square peg in a round hole, so to speak, with Google. That's not going to work. But content could be something that you could, even as a single property host, do a lot of, have a lot of success with by building it, making it comprehensive, talking about your expertise, your knowledge of the market, that sort of thing.
Okay, awesome, yeah. And you kind of mentioned then not necessarily having to go to tool heavy and going a bit over the top with software, but are there any, tools, software, services that you would recommend of like, judging where traffic's coming from, judging which keywords you should be going after? Is there any recommendations there for hosts?
Yeah, so I'll go free, cheap, and then expensive. So free would be Search Console, and free would be Google Search Console and Analytics, right? Certainly, if once you put Analytics on your website, Google Analytics, you can see where traffic is coming from and how it's behaving on the website. So that's free. I'll kind of check that one off. Search Console, same thing. You verify your website, obviously, with Google, and then Google tells you specifically what keywords your website is showing up for. If you're getting clicks on those keywords, what they look like, that sort of thing. So that's your free kind of option. Cheap, I would say a tool that I like quite a bit, and I still use this regularly, is called Keywords Everywhere. So it's a Chrome extension. You put it on your browser. You buy credits, like tokens, basically, and then you can kind of spend those. But I mean, it's like $10 for like 100,000 tokens. So a tool like that will last for literally, if you're doing keyword research for a single website, I mean, a tool like that might last you a year or 2 years, for $10 or something like that. So it's not free, but it's about as cheap as it gets as far as SEO tools go. And then kind of our workhorse, if you will, is Ahrefs. That's kind of our SEO tool of choice. And it does a lot more, right? It crawls the websites. It gives you a much more comprehensive view of keyword data. It gives you a lot of additional tools, backlink data being, I would argue, the most valuable portion of Ahrefs tool set, but it's expensive. You're paying 70, 80, $100 a month, and it may not make a ton of sense for, depending on the size of your business or SEO goals, that may not be the right tool for you. But if you're asking for the Mercedes-Benz, the BMW of SEO tools, I would say Ahrefs is that for sure.
Cool. And then maybe you can just spell that out for anyone listening to actually go and Google it in case they're not familiar.
Yeah, it's a play, I guess, on a link attribute, Ahrefs. So H like Ahrefs.com, Ahrefs.com.
Sweet, perfect. Thank you. And so, just kind of like taking a step back from search and not wanting to go too deep down that tunnel. thinking broader about, once someone lands on your site, or maybe it's in search results itself, building trust with guests, right? So they're going off Airbnb, they know Airbnb, they trust Airbnb. How can they trust you, your independent site? How can we help them trust us, basically?
Yeah, so I think content and design go a long way. Obviously, like there's certain technical considerations we might have on the website as far as what words we want to put on it, topics, keywords, etc. But I think if the site doesn't have a nice look and feel to it, if the site doesn't appear trustworthy, it's almost like people can tell. It's like the classic, Supreme Court ruling. I don't know what adult content is, but when I see it, I can tell you that it's adult content. It's kind of like that's why I feel like trust is. It's not one thing. It's sort of this collection of things that kind of relate to design, photography, that sort of thing. But I think one thing people do is like the copy is very weak and short. So I think the copywriting side of it is probably underrated. The photography side of it is typically underrated still somehow, even though people know they need that on their listings. Like that still is underinvested in, I think, by a lot of hosts. I have this client that I work with that I've worked with for some time who sends two professional high-level photographers to every single new listing that he lists. And he goes, why not? Why wouldn't I do that? Because photographer one is going to get a set of shots that I like, and I'm going to use maybe 10 or 12 of them. And then photographer two is going to get a set of shots that I like, 14 or 15 of them. And when I combine them together, I'm going to get a better quality gallery. So no one thinks about that, even though it's one of the most important marketing assets that you have is the photography. Why not send two completely professional photographers out on different days, and they see angles differently? Yeah. They position the property a little bit differently, and it leads to a better outcome. So I think things like that are actually some of the more foundational pieces. And the one thing I see at a lot of like single host sites or smaller host sites is they try to hide who they are, which I feel like is something that you would think they would learn from Airbnb, that if anything, Airbnb on like shared room listings, for example, is very prominent about who you're staying with. Here's Miles, here's his name, here's his photo, here's his background, that sort of thing. And on a lot of direct booking sites that I see, especially new ones, it's like, the name of the company started in 2020 and it was this and that. It was like, people don't really care about that. Like, I think it's much more interesting to see a picture of you, your family, what you're about, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Than certainly something that's like pretending to be overly polished or pretending to be sort of a larger company than you are. I think that can sort of turn off a guest. So those things come to mind. And then certainly if you have, proof of guest staying there, that you can leave more feedback and more little breadcrumbs around that you are legitimate, that helps. So reviews on Airbnb certainly go, some distance. But if you also have reviews and feedback that people have left on Google My Business, or they've left reviews and feedback on your Facebook page, or they've left you a comment or sent you an email and you could screenshot that or pretty that up or put that somewhere, I think those are good ways of going about it as well for trust.
Cool, that sounds good. And then kind of really, broadly and thinking ahead for direct bookings, because you're in deep in the space. Let's kind of get your opinion on, where you think direct is heading in short-term rentals, and what conversation we'll be having in 5 years' time. Will direct be kind of like a much bigger part of the industry? Do you think there's going to be a lot more maturity in direct bookings and like a much more consistency across websites? Where do you see things heading?
That's a good question. I don't know if I know the answer because I couldn't have predicted very well like the COVID boom and what happened from that, and the rise of the single property host, I think has been, pretty prominent. If you look at the last, 2-3 years, it was very different than the 2 or 3 years prior to that. With respect to new people coming into the industry, that feels like that slowed down significantly. So I think that certainly a lot of listings that are currently run by a single property host that was just, printing cash, printing money, I think you'll see a little bit of pullback on that over the next few years, most likely. And it might go to a property manager. And if it goes to a property manager, I think you could make a valid case that maybe there would be a little bit more, interest and investment into direct bookings. But I don't know. If I had to guess, I would say it would probably likely go down overall, because it may be that more inventory comes in the space and it just kind of gets sopped up and, gathered up by the OTAs. But for their professional vacation rental manager or this person that's trying to build a brand, I would hope that they put more effort into it, and they see the benefits of it. But it's one of those things where it takes a lot more maybe creativity. It takes a lot more time, effort, money, etc., to build like an awesome direct booking kind of side of your business compared to building, just throwing things out on Airbnb and it gets reservations. So I don't know if I have a great answer to that. If I had to guess right now, I would say it depends on kind of where that single property host goes. Is that person continually going to be investing into properties when they're significantly more expensive now than they were 2 years ago? Or is that going to slow down? Or some of these properties going to get turned over to property managers where the owner of that asset might just say, well, like it used to be, right? Just cover the costs and, I'll deal with the rest later, that sort of thing.
Oh, fair. No, appreciate your insight and thoughts there. No, that's interesting. Cool. So we're kind of heading towards the end now, Conrad, but I'd love to kind of give you an opportunity to kind of tell us a bit more about BuildUp Bookings, exactly what it is that, you're offering as a service, and maybe some of the courses and additional support that you guys offer as well.
Yeah, so we've been producing a lot of kind of new things over the past year that we hadn't had before. So I mentioned the book that we launched last year. So try to give people a few options, of course. They can go on Amazon, pick up that book. It's $15. Everything in that book is what we do, right? So there's no secrets in there, or that we wouldn't share with you if we were working with you as a client. And I think obviously the service that we sell as like a marketing agency is the execution of said work, right? But my idea is what I think the best options are from step one all the way through these large companies that we've worked with is in that book. So I would say that's one resource people can check out. Pretty, I think, reasonably priced, and there's a lot more value, I would argue, than the price. But of course, I'm very biased because I wrote it. The courses, like you mentioned, that's a new thing. We just actually launched a course that's basically based on the book, but it's like 14 video lessons. We've got 7 different modules. We've got a bunch of different stuff in there. I could, I'll send you a link, or people can go check it out. It's like courses.buildupbookings.com. People can check that out. But our bread and butter, what we've done for the longest time, since 2016, really, is we're a marketing agency, digital marketing agency. Yeah. So I think our specialty is in search, social, and email marketing for vacational managers. That's what we focus on. We recently added more web development capabilities, so we're kind of getting more into that space where we're building custom websites for many of our clients that we're working with and new clients that we're onboarding. So if you're a vacational manager and you have a budget that would support an agency of like ours to potentially assist you, go to buildupbookings.com. There's a form there, you could fill it out, and someone on my team will get in touch with you and see if we could make it a win-win situation for them.
Perfect. Sounds good. Thank you very much, Conrad. Yeah, we'll add those links in the bottom of the description as well. So if you want to check out any of the tools that Conrad's mentioned, or the courses, or the book, you can go and check it out in the show notes as well. Conrad, thank you so much for joining us today.
Awesome. Thank you, Miles. This was fun. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you.